Here's another game that surprised me with its quality. The Jack brothers, Jack Frost, Jack Lantern and Jack Skeleton, are mascot characters from the Shin Megami Tensei series, also made by Atlus. Jack Skeleton was called Jack Ripper in the Japanese version. Speaking of Japanese, the American version of Jack Brothers is much more rare, so chances are you're gonna play this game in Japanese and miss out on the story. Well, the story is that the Jack Brothers are trying to get home. Pretty simple. If you're playing the Japanese version, you're not missing that much. The gameplay is part Gauntlet, part Zelda. The stages are like labyrinths, where you run around, search for keys while defeating enemies. There are 4 worlds with a total of 60 levels, including the boss levels. There is a time limit, but you can pick up items that give you more time. And sometimes you can find secret exits that gives you extra time as a bonus. There's quite a few different enemies, some easy, some hard. There's one that chases you and blocks frontal attacks. It can get pretty scary to be chased by him. There's also one that lays bombs like Bomberman. Later on, the stages have teleporters, boulders to push, spikes and more aggressive enemies. The later levels are hard because not only do you have puzzles and enemies to contend with, but also a pretty strict time limit. And when you die you can only continue on the first level of the world you're in. This is very annoying when you're close to the last boss and get sent back. The 3 Jacks all have different abilities. Jack Frost and Jack Lantern shoot projectiles while Jack Skeleton uses a knife. He's the most powerful of the 3, but the projectiles are a lot easier to use, so it's unfortunately not a good idea to use Jack Skeleton. You can shoot the projectiles, snowballs or fireballs, either by pressing the direction you want with the left D-pad and then shooting with B, but there's a better way. You can use the right D-pad to shoot in all 4 directions and do it while walking too. I think this is mandatory if you want to beat the game. Personally, I went with Jack Lantern, just because fireballs are a lot cooler than snowballs. Or actually, they're not cooler than snowballs, but you get my point. One item that's universal to all the characters is the orbs that you can collect that acts like a shield. The last item is the star. These represent your special attack. These special attacks are unleashed with the R button, and they fill the whole screen. They are extremely useful against bosses. Actually, if you have enough stars with you against the boss, you can defeat them without getting hit. When you're fighting the bosses, the time limit is still in effect, so if you got to the boss with little time left, you're probably not going to beat it. The bosses are all in open areas, and this is where the game starts reminding me of Legend of Zelda. The graphics are good, but the 3D effect isn't used particularly well. The only one noticeable is when you drop down to the next level, but even that isn't all that impressive. Overall, it all feels pretty flat, but this doesn't detract from the game being a very good one. The music is in general simply good, but it also happens to have the single best piece of music on Virtual Boy, Grim Reaper's Cavern. Jack Brothers is a worthwhile game, definitely. It's pretty long, has challenge and fun. Replay value comes from beating the game with all 3 characters and playing on the 4 difficulty settings, including a very hard one for super players. There's a password system with only 4 letters. In fact, all Virtual Boy games that have password systems have good password systems. I guess developers learned their lesson from the NES era. So, Jack Brothers is a good game. But since the American version is so rare and expensive, I say get the Japanese version.